Yeah, so the EU has its own vaccine program, basically where it will attempt to come up with agreements when there is a vaccine to bulk buy it for its member states. Now, it invited the UK to take part. I think initially ministers have been considering it because of the sort of power of bulk buying, if you like. We understand, though, today the UK will reject that invitation. All of the noises coming from government, although there's nothing on the record yet, but sources saying that this isn't to do with politics, this isn't to do with Brexit, this is about practicalities. They're understood to be especially concerned about not getting a place on the steering group, which could mean delays eventually of the vaccine making its way into the UK. What has developed as something of a flashpoint between the UK and the EU, though, is some suggestions overnight in newspapers that the EU could essentially deprioritise the UK when it came to doling out the doses of the vaccine when it eventually came along, giving it to member states before the UK. The European Commission spokesperson has today said that actually it would be handed out by population, so there would be no concern over that. Also taking issue with a suggestion in some of the newspapers that in the initial negotiations around this scheme, the EU asked the British government to drop its support for vaccine programmes in this country. So we've seen trials going on at Oxford University, trials going on at Imperial College in London. Government sources, anonymous sources, I should say, quoted in the newspapers suggesting that the EU had initially asked the British government to pull support for this. The European Commission saying that is not true and completely misleading, and that they would back any efforts to try and find a vaccine. Now, opposition parties saying this is more evidence of the government essentially putting Brexit ahead of other national priorities, but government sources insisting that this isn't about politics, this is just about practicalities, and they are confident that the UK has its own way of finding a vaccine.